Dale Valor's Inner Game podcast. And I'm excited about this one. And I know I say that every fucking time. But this one's been a long time coming because the guests that we got coming on today, we've been trying to make arrangements, trying to make it work now for probably a month and a half. You know what I mean? And we finally were able to lock it down and get it in there. But before we get into that, you may say to yourself, what is Inner Game? Because you might be new to the podcast. And if you are, welcome. If you're not new, you keep coming back again and again and again, well, welcome back. So, yep. Inner Game, what is it? It's the relationship that you have with yourself. If the relationship with you suffers, so will all your other relationships. Because, hey, look, man, at the end of the day, if you don't like you, if you don't have self-confidence, if you have too many negative voices monologuing in your head, if you are indecisive, look, that is going to be cause for the people around you to not really want to mess with you that much, right? Because you don't really care or respect yourself enough. And so that's what we're going to work on here. And the guest I got coming on today, that's what he does in large part. But before we get into that, my trusted confidant, Shabam, as always, here. How you doing? You good?
Pretty good, pretty good.
All right, ringing endorsement. But today we got coming on a guy that's one of the coaches and part of the leadership of Echelon Front. And if you don't know what Echelon Front is, that is the coaching program company that Jocko Willink owns, operates, runs. All right. And this is like one of his main dudes. And that guy is Codey Gandy. And look, man, I'm really excited about this. We're going to delve deep into a bunch of different topics. And speak of the devil, he's right here, right on time. All right, let's let him in. And then we'll really get the party started, you know? So there he is. What's up, man? How you doing? All right. Your volume is a little low. Are you able to turn your mic up at all?
Yeah.
Turn my mic up a little bit. I guess I can talk louder.
Okay, that'll work. Yeah. You sound good now.
Yeah, you sound much better.
Yeah, you sound good. You sound good.
Okay, perfect.
Hey, thanks for being here, man. I know that we were trying to put this together for a little while, you know what I mean? And so I'm glad that, you know, you were able to carve out a few minutes to hang out with us for a little bit.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity more than anything.
Oh, that's dope, man. Thank you so much. And before we get into anything, you know, I just want to say, you know, thank you for your service. I'm a huge proponent of veterans and, you know, like it means the world to me, man. You know what I mean? So just want to say thank you for your service and protecting our country. Yeah, well, not Shabam's country so much, but mine. But yeah, so look, man, you know, one of the things I was doing a little digging before getting on here and just, you know, kind of, you know, checking out some YouTube clips and just Instagram and different things. And one of the things that I really picked up on in, you know, what it is that you coach and teach and things like that is leadership, you know, and I find that to be such a nebulous topic for a lot of guys. You know, our audience is primarily men, probably 100%. And one thing that guys always want to do, seemingly, is be a leader. You know, like you hear it all the time. But yet there's so many guys that just aren't. You know what I mean? So what are some of like the characteristics and qualities and things like that that you look for if you were starting up a company, you're starting an organization, and you know that you need to have those capos, you need to have like those guys that are going to lead teams and things like that. What are some of the characteristics and qualities that you would look for as somebody that, you know, really advocates leadership?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Honestly, over the years, it's changed. And since joining Echelon Front, my mindset has switched a little bit. In the Marine Corps, I always thought it was a little bit different, but looking at things now through the lens, my perspective now, I would really look for one thing, and that's just the concept of humility. If somebody's coachable and teachable, it really doesn't matter like who they are as an individual, because if you're coachable and teachable, then if I'm your boss, I can get you up to speed or where you need to be. If somebody's arrogant or somebody's cocky or somebody has a big ego, then that's not going to happen. So as much as people, they look for like these alpha type individuals, is that nice? Yes. But typically those alpha type personalities, it comes with some baggage, which is a giant ego. And when you have a giant ego, you don't listen to other people's opinions. You don't listen to other people's perspectives. You don't care what other people think. You care about what you do as an individual. And that's when you start to internally sabotage an organization or whatever the case may be. So for me, and I answer this question all the time we work with a lot of organizations across the world, and people say, hey, what do I look for in an interview? And it's somebody that's humble, somebody that's willing to ask for help, somebody that's coachable and teachable. All that means is I can get them where they need to be, and they're going to listen to insight from their peers, from their subordinates or other leaders, so they can get to where they need to be within the organization.
Yeah, that's dope. I know for me in my coaching, you know, I primarily work with guys, but more in the dating space. And,
yes,
and part of my role, the big part of my role is dealing with what's called inner game. I don't know if you're familiar with the term or whatever, but,
sure.
You know, but bottom line, you know, helping them develop more self-confidence, better self-esteem, things like that. And the guys that do well, the guys that really make big, massive improvements in a you know, rapid, short amount of time are the guys that I like to call as being needy. I tell my guys, be needy, you know, like ask questions, man. Don't just sit there and, you know, like think either you know it all already, or, you know, you just are too apprehensive or shy or whatever the case is to ask questions. The guys that ask questions are the guys that do well, because the answers apply to them in their own individual lives, you know, and that's the kind of guys that I absolutely love to work with, you know. Do you find that, like, I mean, I know this is kind of a hypothetical question because this would never, ever be a reality, but if everybody's a leader, who's a follower?
I think there's a balance. There's a balance to this whole thing. So at Echelon Front, the company that I work for, we say that everybody is a leader within an organization. Mm-hmm. Everybody here on this call, everybody in life. And why that is the case is because if you break down leadership, like the definition of leadership, all it is the ability to influence another human being. As long as you interact with another human being, you have that capacity to lead, regardless of if you are directly in charge of them, they're your peer or your subordinate. Now, with that, in the same breath, to your question, there's a balance to everything that we do. If I just demand control of a scenario, if I'm always in the front doing everything, then I'm going to lose track of my team. I'm not going to be able to accomplish the mission, et cetera. So there's a balancing act to everything that we do. And there's a time when you need to lead. There's a time where you need to follow. There's a time when you need to ask for help. There's a time when you need to ask questions. There's a time when you need to shut your mouth and just do what you're told. All those things come into this. That's why leadership is a pretty simple concept. It's a universal term, yet it's so hard to actually hone in and get good at because there's so many different variables to this. So to your point, I believe everybody is a leader. If you interact with another human being, you have that ability to influence, but there is a time to stop. There is a time to follow. There is a time to take direction. And like you said, there is a time to ask questions. I love that asking questions statement that you said, because I think there's a stigma to, men and people in general, that it's a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's a sign of weakness to ask the question. Yeah. It's better for me to just figure it out. But if you truly think about it, where do you, what shows more weakness? Me not asking a question and going and failing said objective, me not asking the question and not doing the right thing, or me showing humility and saying, hey, you know what, Dale, I don't know what's going on, man. Hey, can you reteach me that so I'm on the same page? That actually doesn't show weakness. That actually shows humility. That shows that I'm capable of asking for help, which in the end is actually a great thing. So I love that question statement that you said, because I think that's universal. Men, women, whatever organization, it's a thing that we all go through right now, because asking questions is weak. Asking for help is weak, but it's not. It's actually it's on the opposite side.
Yeah. I would actually even say that it's a sign of intellect, because you know what you actually understand and what you don't understand. And you're smart enough to be like, okay, this is something I'm not good at. like whoever it is, like for example, Dale, just teach me this, that's the humility at the same time, like, self-awareness to know that you don't actually understand or you just need help.
Yes,
that's
sir.
a big part of it.
That's awesome.
Like I know, well, for me, I have kind of a little bit of an issue with like the alpha term. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it not so much like in the I guess the definition of it, but the application of it. Like guys tend to think like, oh, I need to be alpha. I need to be that dude. I need to run everything. And if I don't, that means I'm a bitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, that's so ridiculous. Like the way I put it, and I love what it is that you do, man. I think that leadership is something that needs to be instilled in everybody, because there's always going to be facets of your life that you are going to have to lead something, even if it's leading yourself to your own goals. You know what I mean? But with the alpha thing, the way I equate it is just simply leadership skills. Like if you can be a leader, you can, like real alphas don't like think about like, I gotta be alpha. You know what I mean? And when they do that, what happens? It's just like, they make way too many mistakes. They don't rely on anybody. They have to make every decision. But that's like, the way I put it is like this, man. If I'm going to sit and do my taxes, but I got to be the alpha, like, guess what's going to happen? Like, I'm going to be in trouble with the IRS. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I get dropped off in Africa somewhere on a safari and I got a guide that's leading me through the jungle and I'm like, out of the way, beta, I'm the alpha here. Guess what's going to happen? I'm going to get eaten by a hippopotamus or something. Like sometimes that leadership role, why does the president have advisors? He's the top dog. What does he need advisors for? He's the alpha. It's such a ridiculous way of going through life, just trying to, prove yourself as being the leader, being the guy, being the alpha. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a pet peeve of mine. It rubs me the wrong way. You know what I mean? But
absolutely.
With what it is that you coach, now do you coach like guys one-on-one? Is it more like a group thing? I know you do public speaking events and things like that. I'm assuming with like corporations for like leadership type, presentations and whatnot. But like if, say for instance, I'm going to sign up with Echelon Front, right? And what can I expect to happen? Like what's the protocol? What am I going to learn? How is this going to pan out?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different stuff that we do. So what we used to only do was like a standard engagement, which is like a keynote or a workshop. So I would come work with your organization. I'd give a speech for 60 minutes or 4 hours or 6 hours and just dive into the concepts that we teach, how to become a better leader. That has evolved over the years. Now we do a lot of online stuff, which we call the Academy. We do a lot of strategic advising, which is one-on-one. Hey, you're a CEO, you're a foreman in your company, and you want to get to the next level. How do we do that? So there's one-on-one, there's group settings, there's corporate settings, there's individual events that we have where people can come to. We have a muster, which is a 2-day conference where Jocko and Leif, my bosses, they put on a pretty grand show to teach people leadership. We have individual events like the FTX, which is the program that I run, which is our hands-on training. So you learn the stuff that we teach in real time, running through hypothetical military scenarios. So there's a lot of stuff. And the reason that is the case is because everybody learns a little differently. Some people can learn all the stuff that we teach simply just by reading the book. Some people need face-to-face interaction. Some people like virtual. Some people like getting outside their comfort zone. So we have a little bit of everything to get people where they need to be.
What's a couple of like the biggest sticking points when guys or an organization or whatever signs up? What's like a couple of the biggest sticking points that you seem to run into consistently that is just in their blind spot that they're just not seeing, that needs to be pointed out to them? And like, here's how we get past that.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So what's unique about the stuff that we teach is it's not basically, we didn't reinvent the wheel. So a lot of the stuff is stuff that everybody All of us on this call, everybody, we know we should do it, but we don't because it's easier not to, and our ego tells us not to do it. The number one inhibitor for people to implement this stuff is ego, right? So some of the core concepts that we teach, we talk about cover and move, which is simply building relationships, which is almost comical because you have a veteran-owned company with Navy SEALs and Marines, and we teach stuff that we learned from the military. And the first thing we tell people is you should strive to build a relationship with every single person that affects your mission. The stronger the relationships, the more likelihood of mission success. And people are like, well, I'm here to hear war stories, and you're talking about building relationships, but which is comical, but that relationship piece is paramount in everything that we do. So it goes on. We talk about simple, which is communication. We talk about dealing with our emotions as an individual, and we talk about empowering other people to lead. So all this stuff, when I teach it, everybody's like, yeah, I've heard this before, but we give a lot of reasons why it is beneficial from an organization standpoint and from a team standpoint. And it's a lot of aha moments, but it's a lot of habitual habits that people have built in over the years. I mean, the name of the book from the concepts that we teach is titled Extreme Ownership. Like, I'm sure all three of us have heard that word ownership before, which is just accountability, responsibility, and ownership of what we do. Yet it's the name of the book for a reason, because it is the biggest habit. It's the biggest thing that we don't like to do is take responsibility of what we do. It's easier to blame other people. It's easy to sit on the sidelines and not say, hey, I took part in that. And so what we show people is, hey, the answers that you need, they're right here. They're very simple, but they're not easy. And so a lot of people, they have these blind spots up. Their ego has this wall built up because your ego doesn't like to hear, hey, go build relationships with other people. Your ego doesn't like to hear, hey, you need to speak in a way that makes sense to them, not to you. Your ego doesn't like to hear, hey, don't act emotional, don't be direct. And your ego doesn't like to hear, hey, let other people on the team take control, give more information to other people part of the team. And the last thing and the biggest thing is your ego definitely doesn't want to hear, hey, this is my fault. Hell no. Nobody's ego like that. So that's the biggest sticking point is when I get in the door, when the instructors at Echelon Front get in the door, there's almost a disadvantage off the bat because a lot of the stuff we say is directly attacking people. And they're like, oh, I don't like this. This sounds like a lot of work. This sounds like a lot of effort. But hopefully we can show them that, hey, if you want change, if you want a better environment, if you want a better team, if you want a better self, the answer is right here. They're really simple, but it takes a campaign, it takes a team, and it just takes a little patience to get to where you want to be.
Very cool. Very cool. You know, and you're right, man. Like anything worth changing is going to take a significant amount of effort, you know, especially if it's something that's instilled in you, like hanging on to an ego or something like that. Those things are always difficult to let go of for, you know, most people. And so it's like everybody wants to try to reinvent the wheel to make something easier, you know, and it's like, man, there's no magic pills. There's no 8-minute abs. There's no, you know what I mean? Like, these are things that you have to do with repetition and do it again and again and again and again in order for it to you know, really cement mentally. So it's effective for you, you know? So yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Now, what are some of the parallels? I mean, this may seem like a very obvious question or answer, I guess, but what are some of the parallels that you found being in the Marines that equates to what it is that you teach now and, you know, what it is that you do now? Like, what are some of the things that really correlate?
Yes, sir. So what's been unique is, so when I first came out and saw Echelon Front, I'm seeing Jocko, I'm seeing Leif, seeing the other instructors, and I was a little unsure on their ability to teach the stuff outside of the military. So I have, you know, these Navy SEALs and Marines, and being in the Marine Corps, I understand there's a certain way that we do things. And I was unsure how, you know, a tech company or a startup sneaker company or a fire department, they were going to relate to what we did. It's all the stuff that we teach. It stems from the military through combat, through training, and then it was put out in a way where it is universal for everybody. So when I first came out and saw Echelon Front, I was helping out, and honestly, I was a little hesitant. They were working with a gas and electric company up in Michigan, and these people did not want to be here. These people were not excited that Jocko was there. They weren't paying attention. They weren't bought in. I'm in
Michigan, so I get it.
People people were stating like, hey, there's nothing you can teach me. I've been here for 30 years. I have it all figured out. Like, all those cliche sayings. It was a real thing. And I'm sitting there. I was like, you guys really do this for a living? Like, this seems a little rough. But in a span of six hours, which the training was, I was absolutely blown away by the change in perspective, the change in mindset, which is very unique because people have their ways, people build habits, people build tendencies. And in 6 hours, Jocko, Leif, and the team, they're able to change that. Change the 35 years of habits that people have built, which is absolutely crazy. So when I saw that, I was like, they have something special. So I dove all in. I was like, hey, I just want to be a part of the team. I want to help. And over the years, what I learned is, we may have learned this stuff in the military, but it's applicable to every aspect of your life and in every organization. The stuff we teach to organizations, I would argue it applies more to the home front than it does on the business self. In addition, the problems that I face as a Marine, the problems that we faced in the military, they're the same problems that everybody else faces, which a lot of people are like, there's no way that you have the same problems that I have.
I had no sniper shooting at me today, man.
and that's a variable. There's different variables to the problems that we face, but at the root cause, all the problems that everybody faces, they're the same. There's no such thing as a unique problem. And I tell people that, and some people get a little offended. But if you actually trace down the root, you remove the surface, you uncover the root, really what you're talking about, majority of the problems is it's people versus people. It's ego versus ego. It's personality versus personality. So if you strip that all away, you understand that, hey, the people at Starbucks, the people at Target, they have the same problems as the people in the Marine Corps do. And if you have the same problems, then it's the same answers. There's just some variables that you have to dance around and you have to work around. So that's been the most, I would say, eye-opening thing for me. It's been very unique for me to see that myself as a Marine, the challenges that I face, the success and failures that I had, they're actually everywhere. I was just in Mississippi working with the police department. They had the same problems. I was just up in the Northeast with a electrical company, gas and electric. Same exact problems that I had in the Marine Corps. So it's been really eye-opening, but also refreshing, because when I go to these organizations, there's like, you're not a lineman, you're not a cop. I'm like, I know. I actually know that I'm not one of those things. However, the answers are the same, which is pretty awesome to see, considering the dynamics of, what people do for a living, the span of what people can do. It's pretty crazy to think about. But at the end of the day, it all stems back to what you do as an individual, what you can control, and how you navigate that looks a little different for everybody.
So what are some
I had a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, like you just said, right? There was a point where you said ego versus ego, right? So
Yes.
how exactly do you combat it, or do you just let go of the ego? What's the process according to you that is helpful to the people who are listening to the podcast, say, for example, like a brief overview or some along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime I hear, so we get a lot of questions, it'll be like, hey, I have a boss that has a big ego, or I have a peer, I have a subordinate, whatever. And the biggest thing, when I hear somebody say, hey, somebody else has a big ego, that tells me that that person has a big ego as well. So anytime you're going ego versus ego, the first thing you have to do is you have to check your ego. We say detach from your ego, which means, hey, take a step back, be cognizant of what's going on, be aware of what your ego is telling you. Checking your ego is extremely hard because your ego plays into everything that you do. It's constantly in your ear. It's that cliche like devil and angel on your shoulder. Your ego is going to tell you what you want to hear, not necessarily what you need to hear. For example, in this conversation, my ego is probably telling me some things like, hey, you should say this instead of this. But I have to stop. I recognize that. I'm aware of that and say, hey, you know what? That actually doesn't make sense. Hey, actually, that's coming from a place of arrogance. Actually, I need to stop and take consideration of what it's saying and then go from here. So I'll say anytime you find yourself ego versus ego, as much as we want to blame other people for their ego, that's a cop out. That's the easy way out. And what people need to recognize is, for the most part, 99% of the time, you can't control another person. I can't be on this call and try to change you guys. I can't make you change your ego. I can't be like, hey, listen to your ego. If I tell Dale, if I tell you, hey, check your ego, if I tell you to calm down, what are you going to
do? Most people are going to be resistant.
You're going to be resistant. You're going to do the opposite of what I'm trying to accomplish. So if we recognize that we can't control other people, what can I control? Which is myself. So if somebody has a big ego, cool, I'm going to put my ego in check. If somebody wants to run with their plan, I'm going to support their plan. As long as they're not, going to drive the car off the cliff, as long as it's a viable plan that's going to successfully complete the mission, I don't care who gets the credit, which is awesome because I see that at Echelon Front. I work with a lot of people. I'm the youngest guy on the team by almost 10 years. And I have Jocko, who enlisted in the SEAL teams when I was born. And I'll go to an event with Jocko, and Jocko will be like, hey, what do you want to do? Jocko asks me, I'm like, are you sure you don't want to do what you want to do? Like, I'm sure you have a better idea. But he generally wants my input. So does everybody on the team. So it's pretty awesome to see when people check their ego, what they're actually capable of. So moral of the story is, hey, ego versus ego. You can't control somebody else's ego. What you can control is yourself. But that's really hard to do. Honestly, our minds can be like, hey, you can actually change how they think. You can change how they listen. Which is actually crazy when you say that out loud, because that's not a reality. That's a fantasy.
Yeah. Years ago, a quick story. Years ago, I would find myself, I'm a pretty strong personality, and I would find myself in situations where I'm just meeting new people. Maybe I'm invited to some get together at somebody's house or whatever. And I'm meeting a bunch of new people. I would quickly identify who I don't like. You know what I mean? Like here's this guy over here, like, and no, for no good reason at all. I'd be like, I don't like that guy. You know what I mean? And I would chalk it up to intuition, like, oh, there's probably something about that dude I'm just kind of picking up on, But really what it was, and somebody pointed this out to me one time, and very astutely at that, was like, dude, all it is that you see the other person that's the strong personality in the room, and it's like rams bumping heads, And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. And so from then on, anytime I still get that impulse, like where I'm like, I don't know if I'm feeling this guy, you know what I mean? And I'll still get that impulse, but at least now I know that I can check it, that I can look at that and like really analyze it and say like, okay, is this just me being silly, or is there something to this? 99% of the times it's just me being silly, And so once I do that, then I go out of my way to befriend that individual, just to prove to myself, like, I'm being stupid. Like, there's nothing wrong with this guy. He's a cool guy, as a matter of fact, And so, yeah, man, I totally get it, and it can be difficult to do sometimes, but I think it's like one of those things that's like anything else. You do it enough, you start to callous, and it becomes easier.
Yeah. And I think the self-awareness of when our ego flares up, or like in your situation, being cognizant of that, thought process, that's the hardest thing. If you can develop that, it's extremely powerful. And why I say that is, I think us three, we've all seen it. Majority of people have seen it, where somebody's in the room and they're an a-hole, or they have a big ego. Like, it's really easy for us to see somebody else with a very big ego. It's really to see it's glaring. You're like, holy cow, like, what is that person doing? It's easy to see other people do it. It's really hard to see ourselves because you can't look at yourself in the mirror in those situations. However, being aware of it, because look, at the end of the day, you as an individual, why you do things better than anybody else. Like, that. With that being said, you're going to justify to your death, like, why you did those things majority of the time for the wrong reasons. So being aware that, hey, your ego is taking course, or it's voicing itself in the wrong way, that's the hardest thing. So I always stop and I tell people, like, hey, we've all seen that person that's an a-hole. We've all seen the crazy person that's never wrong. We have always seen the person that never shows humility. Like, don't be that person. And how you don't be that person is simply being aware of when your ego is starting to kick in. So Dale, I think that's really cool. That self-awareness factor, that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, I think
Can
so.
you like you said, right? You basically keep the ego in check. Is it possible to change the ego? I mean, your internal ego, or the inner voice, as you say, to be someone who's on your side instead of on the opposition side? That sort of a thing. So, for example, most people struggle with it, right? In the opposite way, especially the people who listen to the podcast. They have an inner voice, which is basically going along the lines of, you're not good enough, or you can't do, like, something, or along those lines, basically a negative inner voice. Is it possible to change it completely? Or
I think,
is
I think,
that
yeah, I think eventually, but I mean, you're talking about a campaign to change, how you think about a given situation. That's hard to do. That takes some serious training, but I don't think it's impossible. I would say the easiest course of action and the easiest path is maybe not change entirely like your thought process, but simply being aware and understanding that, hey, this isn't what I want to say right now, or this isn't what I needed to say. That's actually just my ego telling me to say this rather than this. Because when you can do that, like I said before, your ego plays a role in everything that you do. It's a thought in your actions, in your inactions, in the words you say, and the words that you don't say. So being aware and understanding, like, you know what, that's my ego, and just stopping, that will help correct the course. And over time, you're building up that skill. Then it's almost you don't even have to think about it. So eventually, to your point, it's not, oh, that's my ego. Eventually, it's just like, oh, I'm already there and I can already go here. So I think, trials, which you're going to have to learn. Some people have to learn the hard way, especially if you're stubborn person, trying to get out of that way. If you've had a big ego for the last 20 years, like, talk about trying to break a habit, that's going to take some time. But I think eventually, done the proper way, you can get there. It's listening to your ego and overcoming your ego. That's a skill, just like leadership is a skill. And what's unique about leadership, what's unique about controlling your ego, with it being a skill, it's a perishable skill as well. We get asked the question a lot, are leaders, are they born or made? And I think with the ego as well, like,
I was going to ask you that. You already stole it from me. But go ahead.
So whether it's leaders born or made, or, hey, am I born with a big ego, or am I born with humility? I think it's a little bit of both. I think people are born with, some different temperaments. I think people are born with some different characteristics that are going to set them up maybe a small percentage better than other people. Maybe I can control a room. Maybe I'm able to raise the tone of my voice. Maybe I'm a little more charismatic with the words that I say with people. I can build relationships easier. That's going to give me a slight advantage. But leadership is a skill. Controlling your ego, listening to your ego is a skill. And if we know that, then we understand that, hey, it just takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of patience. It takes training this over time to get to me to where I want to be. And then it's a powerful thing. It's not this, I can never be a leader. Hell yeah, I would. If you asked me when I was 18, if I've ever be doing what I'm doing right now, if you asked me when I was 18, if I've ever joined the military or be a leader in the military, I would have said, hell no. At 18, I didn't want to join the military. I was playing college football. I had a knee injury, and I had some people that were in the military, and they were reaching back out to me to see how I was doing. Mm-hmm. And what was unique about that is I'm 18. My world is over. My mission is gone. I have nothing that I can do. I have nothing to give the world. And these guys are dealing with life or death overseas. And it really put the thought of perspective in my mind, which is something that I carry through to this day, that, the problems that I face, the problems that we typically face, they're really no comparison to what other people have going on. Honestly, the problems that we all typically face are just minor inconveniences, but we attach this big negative connotation to it, and it's the worst thing that ever happened. And so listening to those people that were literally had severe problems, I was like, oh, I can't play a sport right now. Like, that's not a big deal. So that changed. Like, I want to be like them. So I joined the military. And look, when I joined the military, I'm one of the biggest introverts that I've ever met. I don't like talking to people. I like staying in my own bubble. I don't like public speaking. I don't like any of that.
Sorry to put you out there, man, on the podcast then.
No. It's fine now, because I do this for a living and I'm comfortable in it now. But back in the day, there wasn't you couldn't pay me to do this back in the day. But over time, it was a skill. Over time, being put in position as a leadership, when I'm in charge of 12 other 19-year-olds, like, hey, you have to figure it out. And so over time, whether it's leadership, whether it's ego, whether it's whatever you want to do, there is a process to it. There is a methodology to it. It's just a matter of navigating that path. And you're going to navigate that path. You're going to have some failures. You're going to have some successes. But eventually, if you do the right thing for the right amount of time, you're going to get to where you want to be down the road, whether that's being able to listen to your ego, whether that's leading a team, whether that's leading yourself. There is a path for everybody, but everybody's path looks a little different. And there's a different timetable for everybody as well.
Who did you play ball for?
So I live in California. I'm up in Northern California. I went to a community college out here because, I was really small after high school. I was going to transfer up to a D1 school up north, but that's when I hurt my knee. And
I got you.
Didn't work out. So
all right. Well, at least you didn't lose a scholarship.
that is
Silver
true.
lining, right? Now, earlier you had said that there's, a lot of the same problems that you would have in the military is what people might have, in their day-to-day 9 to 5 or whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's, like you said, police department, electric company, whatever the case might be, outside of, just battling egos. What are some of the parallels that you see in those problems, that something that could happen in the military versus something that could happen at Starbucks?
So I primarily, the last 2 years, so I've been doing this for 5 years. So the last 2 years, I work with one of my colleagues and we run our first responder program. So me and him primarily do all the working with law enforcement, working with fire, working with EMS, all those guys. And the reason my buddy that works with me, he was an actual first responder. He was a firefighter for almost 18 years. Awesome guy. His name's Danny Ziem. But for myself, my dad's been a cop for almost 30 years. So that's all I've ever known. It's something that I've wanted to do at a very young age, but my path just changed out differently. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've primarily been doing. So I've seen a lot of universal themes through the first responder side, which shouldn't be a shocking statement considering first responder agencies are typically paramilitary. So there is a direct correlation there.
Yeah.
But I would say the biggest theme besides, this internal conflict, ego versus ego, personality versus personality, is there's a lot of emphasis on external factors to what we do as an individual. And what I mean by that, there's a lot of reasons why we don't do stuff because of other people. There's a lot of reasons why we can't accomplish the mission because of, the supply chain, because of vendors or whatever the case may be. So anytime I come talk to a group, which I do it really frequently. Last year, I was gone probably 250 days out of the year, traveling.
Buddy.
But when I go talk to an organization, and this will hopefully show you guys that when I say these are universal, when I say there's no such thing as unique problem, when I come in and one of the first things I say to any organization is I say, hey, write down a problem that you're facing right now. And you have to understand, like, people may be in the same company, but your problem and my problem, they look a little different. And I don't put any limitations on it. I was like, if you have a problem at home with your spouse, with your kids, with the neighbor, at work, with your boss, all this stuff, I say, nothing's off the table. Whatever problem you have, write it down. And I tell them, like, hey, my goal, and I'm really confident in this, is I'm able to solve that problem, give you a solution to that problem by the end of the day. So hopefully, like, that statement right there should show you that, hey, the stuff that we teach, it is universal, because I have yet had a question at the end of the day where there wasn't a pathway to do it. Right. Some people don't like the answer that they get. Some people want hey, I want this fixed overnight, and that is not the case. But the answers are definitely there because these things are universal. So going back, these external things, for law enforcement, they will look to, like the local government, the laws that are being, impressed upon us. A lot of people want to blame these things that they have no control over. And so what is unique about that, and I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people over the years about this, is, hey, these external factors, like what other people are doing, you can't control those. And we put so much emphasis on what other people are doing that we neglect what we are actually able to do, what we can actually control, because there is power in that. Hey, as an individual, there are certain things that people can't take away from you. That is how you respond to what is going on. That is your attitude to a situation. That is your discipline when stuff gets tough. People can't control those. That is your decision that you are making every single day. And so at the core root of this, it's this concept of ownership. So ownership in itself, the Cliff Notes version is, and look, you can buy the book. It's 380 something pages. Cliff Notes version is
it's all $380. Like, damn.
It's like $20 on Amazon. But Cliff Notes version of the book is it's all your fault, the end. That's what it's about. It's about you looking at a situation and identifying how you played a role in this. And so a lot of questions that I get are, hey, something happened to me. I didn't play a role in, and I have no control. And so what I tell people, and I tell this to family members, I tell this to whoever it is that is something that you cannot control. What you can control is what you do next. What you can control is you can take ownership of the solution, because you have to think, all of us, there's 13 instructors at Echelon Front working in all walks of life. Like sometimes we get some pretty crazy questions. Yeah, sometimes we get a question like, hey, my spouse cheated on me. How do I take ownership in that? That was one of the first questions that I had. And that, honestly, that's the hardest question that I've received is, hey, my spouse cheated on me. How do I take ownership in that? Like this sounds
Welcome to my world, man. I get those kinds of questions every single day.
And look, and what I tell people, and I've had some close people in my life that are going through that. And what I tell them, like as I would tell anybody, I tell you guys is, hey, you may not be able to take ownership of what happened to you, but what you can take ownership is what you do next. And there is power in that. Just because something happened to you, just because you're a victim doesn't mean you have to stay a victim. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a time to grieve. There is a time to cope with what you have going on, but you don't have to stay in that stuck mentality forever, because those people, as we've all seen, whether it's in a movie or people that you know, when somebody is stuck in a victim mentality, honestly, they're pretty miserable. Mm-hmm. Yep. Because they have no control of what to do. Everything is happening to them. And there's no power there. What do people want? They want power to make their own decisions. They want the power to feel what they want to feel. And when stuff just happens to you and you have no control, it's a pretty miserable place because you have no control over the outcome. So if something happens to you, taking ownership of the solution is taking ownership of what you do next. And that is a powerful, powerful thing, because there is a end in sight. There is a, hey, I can get out of this hole and move on forward. As long as someone is willing and able to take that first step, which that is the hardest part.
Okay. No, that's dope, man. And I'm big on personal responsibility, like, look, much like you just said, you have control of your actions, how you're going to respond to a situation and things like that. One of the issues that I find, and I'd love for you to touch on this, man. One of the issues that I find that a lot of guys struggle with when looking at the problems in their life, and it could be a lot of them, maybe not as much, whatever. But at the end of the day, if everything is their fault, then, a lot of guys tend to internalize that as a suggestion of, well, I guess I just fucking suck. I guess I'm just a loser because, I can't do anything right. I mean, everything's my fault. The climate change, my fault. You know what I mean? AIDS, my fault. Like everything is their fault, and they internalize that and take it personal against themselves. How do you, when you encounter, I know that you have to encounter that from time to time. When you encounter that guy who has that type of mentality, how do you walk them through like, nah, man, you need to be a little more objective about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a very common question that we get, but it's a very, very good question because it's very real. So there's a pathway to taking ownership, right? Ownership isn't responsibility, basically. Responsibility isn't, hey, this is my fault, and then I'm just using those words like to get out of the situation. Mm-hmm. What it is, hey, this is my fault, and this is what I'm going to do to mitigate this from happening again. So the big disconnect is people, they fall in love with the book title. They're like, hey, ownership, that's awesome. I want to take ownership. And they'll just take it and they'll take it and they'll take it, but they'll do nothing with it. Mm-hmm. Therefore, they'll find themselves stuck in it where it's all my fault and nothing is changing because they're not actually changing. They're just saying the words and not doing anything about it. Let me give you an example. Let's say, let me give you an example with my family because, the listeners here, I know a lot of people potentially, maybe they're married, they have spouses, they have kids. It's hard to, share a hypothetical about like a police department because not a lot of people on this potentially are cops. There's a lot of jobs out there, but the family dynamic, that's very real. So let's say, so I have a wife and my kids in the other room. You probably heard my kids because they're crazies, but I've been married for 6 years. Best thing that ever happened to me. My wife is complete opposite of me, which I think is a very good thing because her strengths are typically my weaknesses and vice versa. So there's a little bit of balance there. Yeah. Additionally, we have 4 young kids. So we've been married 6 years, but we have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
You're busy.
So it's hectic. I had to close the windows because they're outside right now, just getting after it. But let me talk about this ownership and then actually doing something about it. So something happens in the other room. And if I truly believe that, hey, I'm a leader in this household, then I'm going to look at how I played a role in this. Maybe one of my kids does something that me and my wife don't agree with, or it doesn't make sense, or it's not something that they should do. Well, if I'm the parent in this situation, it's not that my kid did the wrong thing. It's that I showed them to do the wrong thing, or I allowed them to do the wrong thing without doing that. So sure, I can say my oldest son, his name's Bear, like the animal. Hey, Bear. Hey, you know what, Bear? That's my fault. You shouldn't do that. I could say that, but I'm actually doing nothing about it. So the likelihood of that happening again with him, it's very, very high. Just like back at work. Hey, this is my fault. And then I just don't do anything. I'm probably going to do the same thing again. I'm probably going to run into the same situation again. So instead of just saying this is my fault, instead of just saying, hey, that's my responsibility, it's, hey, that's my fault. And what I'm going to do next is, hey, Bear, you know what, man? Hey, I didn't show you properly on how to do A right here. Hey, let's actually work on that. That's not how you handle your anger. You don't throw stuff at your brothers and sisters. Hey, next time you get mad, actually, let's go walk in the other room. We'll have a conversation. So I'm putting a tangible plan in place, something that I play a role in to mitigate that from happening again. And over time, through showing him what right looks like, through having a strong relationship with my kid, with being there and being supportive from him, the likelihood of him making that mistake again, it starts to dwindle. It starts to get mitigated. And when those start to mitigate and go away, the likelihood of me having to take ownership of that again starts to drop as well. So taking ownership almost goes off the table because the problem goes away because the solution has been implemented. So that's the biggest thing I'll always say is, hey, taking ownership is step one. And that is the easiest part of taking ownership. The hardest thing you're gonna have to overcome is, well, your ego saying that's not your fault. But step two is, hey, this is my fault. And what I'm going to do moving forward is A, is B, or C, and then actually doing it. Because if you actually do it, guess what happens to the problem? The problem goes away. So therefore, you're not going to have to take ownership of that said problem, which is really nice. However, in the grand scheme of things, we typically don't have one problem. I have 4 kids, so I'm gonna have to take some ownership of a lot of stuff. But as long as I'm willing to do the effort, put in the legwork, I start to pull problems away because I'm going to take ownership. I'm going to solve these problems, and the problems go away. That's what it's all about. So that would be my advice for that. It's a twofold process. Yeah. Step 1 is taking ownership. Step 2 is, hey, implementing an action and actually doing it, and therefore it mitigates the amount of times you need to take ownership in that situation.
Now, in the case of where it's not like an interpersonal type of situation, it's just you having a bad habit, right? And I'll give you a for instance. So I work with a lot of guys who struggle talking to women, struggle getting dates, struggle with attraction, anything in that realm, And so they'll say, well, man, look, last weekend I went out to the club or the bar or whatever. I tried to talk to 15 different women. They all shot me down immediately. I must suck. And if I'm the problem, then I really suck because, they're just rejecting me because they see me as worthless. And you see that it becomes this negative feedback loop, right? And what I'll tell them is this. I'll be like, well, look, you need to take more of an eagle eye look at the situation as opposed to it being first person. What is happening in this situation that all these rejections are happening? Hey, maybe it's the way you present yourself. Maybe it's what you're saying. Maybe your hygiene. Maybe, your posture. Maybe you're not talking loud enough. I mean, it could be a litany of different issues, that can be worked through. But at the end of the day, they're still internalizing it and personalizing it and just making it like, nope, that ain't it. It's just, I fucking suck, And so it's not an issue of like, dealing with their boss or dealing with a family member or something like that. This is just simply on them. Is there a good way to look at that and suggest some type of course of action for themselves as opposed to it being with, fixing a problem with somebody else?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the big things, which is which is cool about this is people that are these guys that are reaching out to you, like that would be the one of the first things that I encourage is to gain another perspective on what you're doing. Mm-hmm. That is powerful. Hey, us as individuals, like our perspective is flawed because when you only look through the lens of your eyes, you only see your point of view. Mm-hmm. And typically that's a clouded point of view. It's what you want to see and not what you're actually seeing. And so when you can gain perspective from other people, when you can gain perspective from a coach who knows the ins and outs of this, that is hypercritical to the success of what you have going on, because you will constantly lie to yourself about what you're doing and what you're not doing. Instead, taking the approach, being humble enough to ask for help from another human being, that is a powerful thing. So I would say the path that they're on right now is extremely critical, is seeking input, seeking another perspective with what is going on. That is going to get them to where they need to be. And don't just stop with one perspective. You shouldn't just seek out one person to see what you're doing, because here's the thing. If I look at a situation and you look at a situation and then you look at a situation, that's only 3 eye sets on this. If I can gain another 10 people's input on what I'm doing right now, that's going to give me more input, more answers to the problems that I have. So if people are going out by themselves, like right there, I would challenge them to have somebody else with them or go with a group, because what you have is you have a bunch of people, and potentially if they're going out together, they're close friends. Hey man, I'm about to go do this. Hey, when I get back, can you just, how was I walking over there? What did I say? What did I not say? Was I loud enough? Does my shirt look stupid? All that stuff. You're gaining perspective from other people that care about you. That's when you'll start to see a trend. That's when you'll start to see like, hey, this is what works, because it's not what I see, it's what somebody else sees. In addition to talking about perspective, hey, if you're getting turned down from another person, this is going to take some severe humility. Ask the question, hey, was it something that I said? Is it the way that I did my hair? Whatever the case may be. But a lot of people, they won't do that because there's so much pride in themselves that there's no way I want to hear why this person said no. However, we don't know what we don't know. Right. And so until you can gain that perspective from the other parties, your friends or the people involved, then what we're doing is we're simply guessing. Yeah. What I'm doing is, hey, Dale, I'm just going to look at you and be like, hey, I know what you think about me. Well, I have no idea what you think. That's like
exactly.
So this is cool. It stems back to the very first conversation, the very first statement that you said about asking questions. People just won't do it. People are stubborn. People are too prideful to ask the question. So gain that perspective from every party involved, not just yourself, because that's flawed. Bring people with you. Ask them how you're doing. If you're getting rejected, ask them, hey, was it something I said, I did, the shirt, whatever the case may be? Because right there, those perspectives, those are going to give you the answers. It's not you. Yeah. It's not you, because what you're going through, what you're seeing, it's a little cloudy. And potentially over time, you'll start to know what you're doing and know what's not working. But initially, that first step is gaining as much perspective as you can on a situation.
Super dope. Love it.
I had another question also. Like you said, right? Like most people kind of have that ego problem, and that's one part of it. The second part, I personally feel, is discipline. Like doing the things that need to be done. Like, for example, let's be real. Most people know the answer to their problems. Okay. Most people. Like, for example, let's say someone is overweight. Okay. They know they need to eat healthy, go to the gym. Now, do they actually do it is a whole another topic. And that's kind of what happens with most people in the dating field also. Like they want to look good. They want to, go to the gym, be healthy and all that stuff. And they want to be confident, other stuff. The problem is actually staying consistent over a long period of time. So like any suggestions or like inputs on how you could achieve consistency, because military is like the perfect place for, building discipline. But how can a common person who's not in the military can, develop discipline on that level?
Yeah. And this is something that we talk about a lot. So we teach the concept discipline equals freedom. So you can see it's on the very top of my book. You can see it's on my shirt. The D stands for discipline. It is
that's for Dale, but that's okay.
It's one of the biggest topics that we talk about, because like you said, it's there's a lot of stuff we know we should do, but we don't, because, well, we're too lazy, because we don't want to, because it's hard, because I have to get up early, blah, 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 all this stuff. Honestly, it's just all excuses on why we're not doing these things. There's two sides to this. So the first thing I'll touch on is there is a huge component on discipline versus motivation, right? A lot of people that go to speeches, they'll listen to a coach and stuff like that, and will give them motivation to do what they need to do. However, motivation is fleeting. Motivation is a Band-Aid. It's a temporary fix to what you have going on. So I always urge people, don't constantly just seek motivation to get what you're doing. That takes that discipline. It's doing the hard things when you don't want to do it. Like you said, it's doing what you need to do and not what you want to do. A big problem with establishing a disciplined mindset on building habits is a lot of people take on too much too soon. A lot of people are going to be like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I need to drop 30 pounds. I'm going to fix my diet. I'm going to drink a gallon of water a day. I'm going to eat half the calories that I should. I'm going to work out 3 times a day for 7 days a week. And you put like all this stuff on your plate. When in reality, like, you know, and I know, like, you damn well you ain't going to do that. You have to start off small.
Yeah.
Because building a habit, it's small iterative steps to getting to where you need to be. So if you want to lose weight, maybe that first step is just, hey, I'm going to work out once a day. And I don't have to put a time cap on it. And then after a week goes by, I start to see, because what people want to see is they want to see gratification with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Why people fall off the path, why people don't stay disciplined is they work out for 3 days. They're like, I didn't lose 50 pounds. Like, that sucked. I want to go back to freaking eating fast food and not working out. People want this overnight fix, and it's not a reality. Those 8-minute abs, it's not a real thing like you talked about, Dale. So you start off small. You start off small because it's realistic for you to maintain. It's realistic for me to work out 20 minutes a day. It's not realistic for me to work out 3 times a day when I have a job and I have family and I have a bunch of stuff going on. So I start off small. And when you start off small, the likelihood of you maintaining it stays pretty high. And when you maintain, you start to see gratification. You lose that pound. You become a little healthier, become more confident. And when you start to see like the benefit from it, you're like, oh, this makes sense. And people have a fascination with that. They love that. And now it's, hey, actually, I'm going to work out an hour today. And then maybe 2 months from now, I'm going to clean up my diet. So I would argue the biggest component for people to not stay disciplined is they take on too much too soon, and they put unrealistic expectations on what they're trying to achieve.
That used to be me to a large degree, where, like, you know, the age old thing, man, you know, here comes New Year's Day. All right, I'm going to be in the gym 8 days a week. You know, I'm going to drink my body weight in water. I'm going to, you know what I mean? And so, and what I found was, like, that was, for me, that was sustainable for a while. You know, like, and I knew better than like the result mindset. I've always been pretty process oriented. But what I found was everything was like a linchpin. Like for instance, I leave the gym and I'm already eating like a third of the calories that I would normally eat, you know, and, you know, drive past Burger King and they're like lofting out that Whopper smoke out into the street, you know, and my stomach's like, roar. And so, you know, I'm like, well, what's one, you know, cheat meal day, I guess, you know, what's one going to hurt, you know? And so after I would do that, everything that day just fell apart. You know, like everything just goes right out the window. Well, I already fucked up. I may as well eat ice cream too. I may as well, you know what I mean? And so I would use that as a justification to not do anything else. You know, like that was kind of my thing. But once I learned to kind of like do it incrementally and not like, you know, you're a bitch if you don't do it all at the same time, all the time, you know, type of mentality, it much more effective the way that you broke it down. You know, one thing that you said earlier about being introverted and doing what you do for a living, you said you could never, ever see yourself back then doing what you do now. How old are you now, by the way?
I'm 31.
31. Okay, cool. So, I mean, honestly, that's not even really that long ago. I mean, it's kind of is, but not really, not in the grand scheme of things. You know what I mean? So now I work with a lot of guys that are introverted. You know, like think you're a classical, you know, computer programmer, engineer type of guy. You know what I mean? And a lot of those guys are just very reluctant to put themselves out there to have the spotlight on them. You know, what was one of the catalysts or one of the ways that you kind of said, like, all right, like, even though I'm this personality type, I have to be able to communicate publicly in order for what I'm doing to work. What was like one or two of the steps that you took in order for that to manifest? Yeah.
So what happened to me is I had an opportunity to step up and take a leadership role, like in my initial training. And for whatever rhyme or reason, look, I joined the Marine Corps because, well, part of it as I really wanted to challenge. Doing sports my whole life, I went through a lot of adversity and things that I could overcome. And so the Marine Corps was this thing like, man, this is going to be tough, something that I look forward to. And so I went there to do things that I didn't want to do. I went there to put myself out there because I know that's what it takes for you to grow as a human being. And so there was an opportunity for me to step up, and there's like 100 people in your typical like first class, and they were like, hey, who wants to be the number one person? Like, you're going to be in charge of the group. And I was, for whatever reason, I was like, I'll do it. And so I really thrusted myself into an uncomfortable situation to, one, see how I would do in a situation. But two, I knew it takes getting uncomfortable to get comfortable down the road. Something that I love about the Marine Corps is you become, it's really easy for you to do uncomfortable things. Because, well, the military, you do a lot of stuff that sucks. You do a lot of rucking, hiking, staying in the field, living outside, and all the stuff that people don't want to do. But you get comfortable getting uncomfortable, which is pretty awesome. So I more or less, that doesn't solve this problem because I thrusted myself into that situation. But if I could give any advice for people that are like me, an introvert, what I would challenge you to do is to put yourself out there and doing something that is going to set you up and give you tools in whatever capacity that you want. So if you want the ability, if you're an introvert and you want the ability to talk to another person, whether it's, going on a date or leading a team, you need to put yourself in a situation to where that skill can be worked on. So maybe that's joining a platform like this. Maybe it's working with a coach. Maybe it's doing a public speaking class. And it's not what people want to do, but hey, if you want to improve yourself, if you want to sharpen the skill, like, you have to put into the work. And so a lot of people, like, taking that first step, it's just off the table. For me as an introvert, talking in front of people, there's no way in hell. What I'm not saying is, hey, if you're an introvert, go sign up to give a speech in front of 1,000 people. No, that's not going to happen. But maybe it's, hey, you work with a group of 5 people. Maybe the next time there's a project and somebody says, hey, he wants to take charge, then you do it. It's taking that small step, because all you're doing is you're starting to build this skill up till eventually, like me now, just the other day, 2 Saturdays ago, I went and talked to 1,000 17-year-olds. You asked me, shoot, 10 years ago, there's no possible way, but slow, small steps in the right direction, honing in that skill. It gave me comfort into having that ability. We need to, with skills, it all comes down to, preparation. It all comes down to honing in on that skill, giving you comfort in those things. Because if you don't have the skill, it's not appealing to go talk to 1,000 people. If you don't understand the content, if you don't understand what you're going to say, if you're just going to go wing it, hell no, nobody wants to do that, regardless if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Being comfortable, being confident in your abilities, then that's me, who's an introvert, being okay with giving a speech in front of 1,000 people. So what it takes, and what people are not going to like to hear, is, hey, if you want to have the skill to go talk to people, if you're an introvert and you want to act more extroverted, what that takes is getting outside of your comfort zone, doing stuff you don't want to do, whether that's public speaking, joining a platform, working with a group. You have to take a small step in that right direction. And what you will see is that it's not that bad. You want to know why? Because whether you're there's more than one introvert in the world. There's a lot of us out there, and they're probably in your house, they're probably in your workstation, they're probably in your group of friends. You have some introverts in there as well. It's the same difficulty for everybody. It's hard for me as it is hard for you. And so taking that first step, putting yourself out there, honing in on that skill will give you the confidence down the road to talk in front of a group, talk to a lady, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm a big advocate of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, stretching your comfort zone. And I know the military definitely makes you uncomfortable a lot of times. You know what I mean? So I know that has to be instilled. My one of my buddies, Zach, he's a former Navy SEAL, and I was staying with him in Austin, Texas, about a month ago. And I was like, hey, man, I'm like, you got a sleeping bag or something like that, for me to crash on? And he's like, nah, you know what? I don't think I have a sleeping bag. And I'm like, what kind of veteran are you, man? You don't even have a sleeping bag? He's like, exactly right. I'm a veteran. I don't need a sleeping bag. I'll sleep on a rock. I don't need to be comfortable. right. Well, I don't want to take up your whole day or anything like that, but this has been a phenomenal conversation. Codey, I'm so glad that you were able to come on, man. Truly inspiring. And I know that the guys watching the podcast, listening to the podcast is going to get a lot out of this. What's a way that people can get in touch with you? Yeah.
So unfortunately my bandwidth and, I've never been a huge component of social media. I didn't have social media till about 3 years ago. If it
wasn't for what I do for a living, this fucking thing would go right out the window. I'm with you.
And so I'm only on one social media platform. It's just Instagram. It's Codey.Gandy. In addition, the stuff that I do at Echelon Front, it's just echelonfront.com. So whatever people need or whatever people want to talk about, like, I'm always here as an individual, regardless if it's for Echelon Front or just in general. So
cool. Very cool. Very cool. Well, again, thank you, man, for coming on. Yeah, dude, wish you well, wish you luck at everything that you're doing. I think it's super dope, man. I mean, I see what you're talking about. And what I teach is like, Shabam, like everything he's talking about is like, I talk about this shit all the time. So appreciate you, man. You need anything, reach out to me.
Yes, sir. Well, again, appreciate the opportunity. Thank you guys.
You got it.
Yep.
All right, guys. Peace.
Nice.